Good morning, dear colleagues, dear media representatives. Thank you for your participation in the press conference focused on the presentation of the fourth monitoring report of Promo-LEX Observation Mission for the elections, for the early parliamentary elections of 11th July 2021. I'm Nicolae Panfil, head of the observation mission. The report presented today covers the period between 9th of June and 22nd of June. The findings that we will present refer to this period unless other remarks are made dedicated for separate chapters. I would like to say from the very beginning that the effort of the observation mission is supported by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, by Council of Europe, and by Netherlands Embassy Office in the Republic of Moldova, as well as by Soros Foundation for the component related to hate speech monitoring. The activity of the observation mission takes place as part of the Civic Coalition for Free and Fair Elections. With your permission, now I will present the main findings of the observation mission for the period mentioned earlier. First, some issues related to the legal framework. I will start by referring to the government meeting of 16th June 2021, where two regulatory documents were approved which can impact the elections. First, it is about decision number 93, which increased the appropriations to the government's reserve fund. Nevertheless, we have to clarify that it is not clear whether this money that was included in the government's reserve fund will be used for purposes of elections or for other purposes. The amount is of about 25 million lei. In this context, I would like to remind that the elections are still not fully funded. The budget of the Central Electoral Commission still has a deficit. So we hope that the money allocated to the government's reserve fund will be used for these purposes in order to avoid the risk of not organizing some activities during the electoral campaign, or the risk of somehow impacting the elections organization. Another government decision that was passed, number 92, it clarifies the time period for the issues of ID cards. It is important to mention that we welcome this decision taken by the government, because in such a way the government requests that the Public Services Agency issues all of the ID cards to be issued at least 2 days before the election date, regardless of the date when the person filed the request. This is a good thing, because in such a thing all of the people whose ID cards have expired will have the possibility to get a new ID card, a valid one, and will have the possibility to cast their votes. In addition, regarding the legal framework, we have also addressed two inadmissibility decisions taken by the Constitutional Court, and in this context, or better said, with regards to one of these decisions, dated 15th of June, the court underlined that the preliminary procedure is compulsory only in case of administrative documents with an individual nature. And CSC decisions on opening polling stations are not administrative documents with an individual nature, but rather with a regulatory nature. Hence, when appealing such decisions, the preliminary procedure is not necessary. This clarification is very important, because previously both the Central Electoral Commission and courts, in particular the Court of Appeals, used to return the request for summons on grounds that the preliminary procedure was not compliant with, which is not an issue on the merits, but a procedural one. And this Constitutional Court decision clarifies which issues or in what situations it is necessary to file a preliminary complaint to the relevant authority, for example, the Central Electoral Commission, and when this is not necessary. Regarding the activity of the electoral bodies during the monitored period, we have found that CEC met in 6 meetings, of which 3 were ordinary and the other 3 were extraordinary. During this period, 49 decisions were passed, 21 accredited observers, 7 registered electoral contenders, 4 amended previous CEC decisions, and 17 referred to other activities related to election organization. During this period, CEC accredited 390 observers, of whom 323 national observers and 67 international observers and experts. I would like to say that cumulatively, as of 22nd of June, a number of 1,201 observers were registered, of which 1,019 are national observers. Of them, Promo-LEX accredited 967 observers, which makes about 95% of all observers. CEC also received 2 notifications from Simple's company and from the Institute for Public Policies on their intention to conduct opinion polls. Promo-LEX, using its team of monitors, is monitoring the electoral activities at the local level. So in this context, I would like to say that when visiting district electoral council, our observers also evaluated how the protection measures are applied against COVID-19. So I would like to present some findings now. Out of 37 councils visited during the monitored period, 9 electoral councils do not have a body temperature register. At least 14 councils do not take the temperature of DEC visitors, and at least 6 councils, the visitors do not have face masks and gloves. At least 7 councils do not display any information on protection measures against the spread of COVID. I remind that these are legal requirements that the electoral councils have to comply with. Also, on 15th of June, CEC amended Decision 4965 on the setting up polling station for voters from the Transnistrian region, from the left bank of the Dniester River, establishing eventually 41 polling stations, meaning by 3 polling stations less, which initially were planned to be set up in Bender municipality and in Korzova. And you know, Bender is an area that is not controlled by the constitutional authorities. Unfortunately, they do not have access to that area. And in the Korzova commune, our control is partial. Some other issues that I would like to mention with regards to the activity of electoral bureaus. So, not all of the electoral bureaus comply with the working timetable. Out of 356 visits made, during 104 visits, their offices were closed. Also, we have found the inaccessible offices for persons with physical impairments. So out of 233 bureaus assessed, only 98 are accessible. And also we found a gender misbalance, because 84% of members are women and only 16% 8% are men. Also, during the monitored period, CEC registered the last 6 electoral contenders. So during this period, the contenders registration ended. For the election of 11th of July, we will have 23 contenders in the ballot. We have 2 electoral blocks, 20 parties and other social political organization, and 1 independent candidate. So we can say that this election is competitive, has a competitive nature. At the same time, CEC refused to register the electoral symbol submitted by the new historic option party. As you might probably know, this party filed a request to the Public Services Agency to change the name for Alternatives and Chances Party. And the acronym they wanted to use was expected to be PAS or PASH, which would have been very similar to the acronym of another electoral contender. That is why, being a violation of Article 53, paragraph 2 of the Electoral Code, the Central Electoral Commission registered this party, New Historic Option, using its full name without offering the right to use the acronym. We remind that there is another electoral contender having the same acronym in the ballot. So this is Partidul Politic Noi, or Noi political party. Regarding the independent candidates that were registered for the electoral run or wanted to get registered for the electoral run, it is about 2 people, Mr. Ion Stegarescu and Vyacheslav Valko. Mr. Stegarescu was not registered. He did not manage to submit enough signatures to be registered, so he submitted only 1,870, but the lower ceiling is 2,000 signatures, so only Mr. Valko was registered. He submitted a list, or better said, in the protocol of his registration, it is stated that he submitted 2001 signatures. Nevertheless, there are some issues to be mentioned in this regard, with regards to the registration of Mr. Valko as an electoral contender. One CEC member issued a separate opinion expressing the disagreement with the vote of CEC members, because Mr. Valko did not manage to collect enough signatures. So in the report we provide more details on this case. A number of verifications of the signature lists for this candidate were made. So eventually, as I've said, he was registered with 2001 signatures, but taking into account the protocols on the signature list verification, where the number of signatures was lower in 2 protocols, there are some question marks regarding how the lists were checked, were verified, and how the signatures were analyzed by the Central Electoral Commission. And now let's move to another chapter from the report about electoral litigations. During the monitored period, Central Electoral Commission received 7 complaints, 3 filed by electoral contenders, electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists, Renatei Usatui electoral bloc, and PACE against other electoral contenders, targeting PAS in 2 cases, and in 1 case electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists. Other 4 complaints were filed by local public authorities against the electoral authority, better said, against District Electoral Council number 16 of Yedinets. These complaints are about alleged use of the image of the president for electoral purposes in 2 cases, campaigning activities outside of the eligible period, and appointing the members of electoral bureaus in violation of recommendations of local authorities in 4 cases. Regarding 5 complaints, CEC issued return letters to the complainants. Regarding the legal terms for resolving the complaints, CEC failed to return as soon as possible 5 complaints, one being returned within 3 days and the other 4 within 4 days. Also, in the report, we've presented a situation when on 11th of June 2021, CEC received a notification by which the electoral bloc of communists and socialists invoke an alleged violation of impartiality by Promo-LEX Observation Mission. At the previous press conference, when we presented report number 1, we spoke about how polling stations are opened for voters from the left bank of the Dniester River, and some statements or expressions used by Promo-LEX were not liked by representatives of the electoral bloc of communists and socialists, and that's why they filed the complaint to CEC. That is why on the 22nd of June, CEC issued a letter addressed to Promo-LEX suggesting to the accredited observers to be reserved in their statements so that they meet with the purpose of observing the elections, having the mission to monitor how the elections are organized without expressing their personal opinion or preferences with regard to some issues occurring in the process of the election. I would like to say that this statement, without expressing their personal opinion or preferences regarding some issues occurring in the process of organizing the elections, is taken from the regulation on the accreditation procedure and statute of observers, Article 19, and this phrase, in the opinion of Promo-LEX Association, limits the rights of observers and goes against Article 68 of the Electoral Code, which sets the rights and obligations of observers. Promo-LEX expresses its concern with regards to CEC position about national observers, and we believe that such a recommendation or such a message is not justified for us to be reserved in our statements, in our declarations. During the monitoring period, at least 11 complaints were filed to the Court of Appeals against the action of CEC. Most of them referred to the establishment of polling stations abroad. You know that this was a long and quite difficult, we would say, process. CEC issued solutions within 5 days, and in case of one complaint within 11 days. Of course, we speak about the complaint that referred to opening the polling stations abroad. Nevertheless, we can say that this period was justified given the complexity of the case examined, given the high number of complaints or appeals, as well as the participation of the Constitutional Court in this process that was notified, and subsequently the case reached as high as the Supreme Court of Justice. Nevertheless, on June 17th, the Court of Appeal partially annulled the CEC decisions of 5th of June and 8th of June, which decided on the establishment of 139 and 146 polling stations respectively. I would like to say that in the reasoning of its judgment, the Court of Appeal considered several arguments, namely that CEC, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration, had the obligation to cooperate effectively and efficiently to identify the information required by the legislator and establish with maximum accuracy the required number of polling stations abroad. Here, they refer to the three legal criteria laid down in Articles 30 and 31 of the Electoral Code that have to be taken into account when setting up polling stations. The Court of Appeal also stated that the authorities should create real rather than illusory opportunities for the voters abroad to exercise their right to vote. As a result of the appeal submitted by CEC to the Supreme Court of Justice, the judgment issued by the Chisinau Court of Appeal was upheld. And as a consequence, on 23rd of June, meaning yesterday, CEC met again and decided to set up 150 polling stations abroad, meaning plus 4 more, if I'm not mistaken, 2 more in the UK, in Germany, and in Las Vegas, United States. And the last issue in this chapter, in the report we also covered a situation that Promo-LEX regards as an abuse by the Orhei mayor's office. The mayor issued on 21st of June 2021 a disposition, an order which prohibits meetings with voters by setting up tents and other temporary constructions. It is important to say that we have found, as part of the observation mission, that, for example, political party Shore is conducting a wide campaign using tents at the national level. In at least 25 districts we have seen such tents, but in Orhei town, where mayor is a representative of Shore party, we have noticed such an order which, as I've said, we regard as abusive. It is abusive mainly because it limits the right to public meetings, and this right, I would like to clarify, was not limited, not even by the National Extraordinary Public Health Commission, which issued previously certain recommendations with regards to how the electoral campaign should be conducted during this period or in a pandemic context. Regarding the electoral contenders, during the period between 9th to 22nd June, at least 1,111 electoral activities were reported conducted by contenders. The most active was the electoral bloc of Communist and Socialist in 26% of the observed activities, followed by PAS 23% and Renato Usati electoral bloc 14% of the observed activities. The most popular activities are distribution of electoral materials, 59% of the cases, and meetings with voters, 32% of the cases. Also, we have found that during the reference period, at least 11 electoral meetings were done with the voters abroad. Of them, 5 were conducted by PAS, 2 by the electoral bloc of Communist and Socialist, by PACE and Platforma DA. Unlike our voters abroad that have access or had the possibility to meet and discuss with some electoral contenders, we find that in the Transnistrian region there are no such opportunities. I would like to underline that on 21st of June, our party tried to go to Transnistria by bus, intending to go to Rybnica, but they failed to do so because the military forces of the Transnistrian regime blocked them. We know about a similar situation that took place this night, also with the involvement of the bus of the same party in Varnica. So, in such a way, we find that, unfortunately, the electoral contenders, or at least some of them, do not have access to the Transnistrian region, which is a severe fact in terms of rights both of candidates and of voters to get informed directly about the electoral campaign, about platforms and so on. In the report, we also spoke about some situations or classical problems specific for the electoral process in Moldova. We have identified at least 61 cases that can be regarded as use of administrative resources for purposes of electoral promotion. 28 cases, it was about the electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists, 9 cases Democratic Party and electoral bloc Renato Usati, 5 cases Platforma Da, 4 cases Party of Action and Solidarity, 3 cases Shore Party, 2 cases PDCM, and in 1 case our party. Also, during the monitored period, at least 1 case was reported. It is about PPDA or Platforma Da that can be regarded as offering gifts with an electoral impact. On 18th of June, Mr. Tutunaro Tudor, candidate on the list of this party, offered to Andreieș Kindergarten from Sângerei an electric grass cutting machine. So the grass was too high on the territory of the kindergarten, so that is why he made this gift. Also, at least 5 cases were reported with the involvement of the Party of Action and Solidarity, 3 cases, our party, bloc of Communists and Socialists, of using the images or state symbols of the Republic of Moldova or images of public authorities from the Republic of Moldova and from other states. Also, during the observation period, at least 2,481 cases were reported of using electoral advertising by 18 electoral contenders. Most of the cases were found with regards to PAS, 25%, electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists, 22%, and Renato Usati electoral bloc, 14%. The most frequent types of advertising used in the campaign were the electoral materials, 38% of the case, visibility materials, 24%, and tents, 16% of the case. Promo-LEX also found at least 3 cases of using electoral advertising in non-compliance with the requirements. So here we speak about the requirements to publish the number of issues printed, date of order, and who made the order, who placed the order. In these cases, the following were targeted: Platforma Da in 1 case, PCCD in 1 case, and in 1 case electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists. Also, 41 cases were found when electoral advertising was placed in areas that are not authorized for these purposes. During the monitoring period, at least 6 cases were reported where the image of religious cults was used for purposes of electoral promotion. It involved the following parties or electoral contenders: electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists in most of the cases, and 1 case our party and PAS party. We also reported 7 cases that can be regarded as situations of intimidation and even use of violence during the electoral campaign. 5 cases involved our party. In 3 cases they were aggressed, assaulted, and in 2 cases our was the one who initiated the intimidation of violent action. 1 case, it was the electoral bloc of Communists and Socialists who was aggressed, and Pace party. in one case. Regarding the funding of electoral campaign, out of the 23 electoral contenders registered, information on appointing the treasury was made public only by 21 electoral contenders. As of this date, there are no information about the new historical option and the independent candidate Vyacheslav Valko. Also, the electoral fund account was opened by 15 electoral contenders out of the 23 registered. Regarding the financial report that was supposed to be submitted in the third week of campaign until 11th of June, 14 reports were submitted. Out of the 17 contenders registered, 3 contenders submitted information on the fact that electoral fund account was not opened. The report on funding the electoral campaign for the 4th week, deadline 18th of June, was submitted by 18 contenders out of the 19 eligible. Regarding the revenues accumulated by electoral contenders in violation of Article 41, Paragraph 1 of the Electoral Code, which stipulates that electoral campaigns funding can use only resources from the activity of employee, entrepreneur, scientific activity or creative activity. In the report, we have presented several cases where 93 donors had personal income that was lower than the donated amount, and some of them did not have any income declared at all in the past 3 years, but nevertheless they made donations for some electoral contenders. In one case, one donor is involved who made donations using his social benefits. So the total amount donated is 278,129 lei. Regarding the revenue raised in violation of Article 41, Paragraph 3, here, which prohibits funding and supporting electoral campaign by legal entities that have concluded public procurement contracts with the state in the past 3 years. So according to the financial statements of 4th of June, one electoral contender, Party of Action and Solidarity, reported revenue in the total amount of 14,592 lei and donation amounting 14,580 lei from 3 donors, legal entities that had concluded public procurement agreements in the past 3 years with the state authorities. We have to notice that these amounts were returned by pass as requested by the Electoral Code. And regarding another article which states that individual can donate only a maximum amount of 6 average salaries per economy, which means no more than 52,296 lei. And here CSC has found that Platforma Da reported in-kind donation exceeding this ceiling. Actually, it is about a vehicle that was donated to the party, or better said, to the electoral contender, and the declared amount of the donation is 70,000 lei. Also, with regards to the use of revenue from the electoral fund in violation of Article 41, which states that the funds from the electoral fund can be used only after being declared to CSC, we found that 5 electoral contenders submitted with a delay the statements on the funds deposited on the electoral fund account. For the 3rd campaigning week, reports were published for 14 electoral contenders, and for the 4th campaigning week, the reports of 15 electoral contenders. Also, starting with the beginning of the electoral campaign and until 18th of June, 15 electoral contenders declared a total amount of revenue amounting to 19,140,890 lei. Of them, 40% were declared by Renato Sato Electoral Bloc, 18% by PAS, 11% by Electoral Bloc of Communists and Socialists, and 7% by the Democratic Party. So in such a way we find that 4 electoral contenders reported 76% of total revenue for the respective period, and the other contenders only 24%. Regarding the declared revenue, here I would like to mention that in 47% of the donations the amounts mentioned earlier come from donations by individuals, including from abroad by Moldovan citizens. 38% come from transfers from the current account of the party made by 7 political parties to the electoral fund account. 9% were made as donations by legal entities, and 6% we have in-kind donations. During the period between 21st of May, 18th of June, 14 electoral contenders reported a total amount of expenses of about 17 million lei. Of them, 43% of the declared expenses were made by 4 electoral contenders, and the other 10% and the other 10 had about 20% of the expenses. Of them, 54% were made for electoral advertising, 30% for promotional materials, and 8% to organize electoral events. Also, we have noticed in the report that for the period between 21st of May and 18th of June, Promo-LEX estimated unreported expenses by PACE, Electoral Bloc of Communists and Communist, Platforma Da, AUR and others in the minimum amount of 94,914 lei. For the 4 week of electoral campaigning, meaning from the very beginning of the electoral campaign, Promo-LEX estimated unreported expenses of at least 4,114,217 lei. 32% of them targets Electoral Bloc of Communists and Socialists, 13% PAS Party, 12% Platforma Da, and 9% our party. Depending on the purpose of the expenses estimated as not reported, most of them were for promotional materials, 52%, expenses for the secondment or delegation of staff, 21%, and outdoor or mobile advertising, 12% of the amount mentioned earlier. Regarding the hate speech and incitement to discrimination in public area, during the monitored period we found at least 30 cases of such type. These cases are covered both by the classic mass media as well as in the online environment. 4 electoral contenders used non-tolerant expressions. It is Igor Dodon in 2 cases, Electoral Bloc of Communists and the Socialists, Vladimir Dodon 2 cases, and Dorin Kertakov from AUR in 1 case. Of them, in 12 cases, targeted 6 electoral contenders: Igor Dodon 4 cases, Vladimir Voronin 4 cases, Igor Grosu, Marina Tauber, Mark Tkachuk, and Vlad Belinsky in 1 case each. Other 2 cases targeted supporters of PAS party and of Electoral Bloc of Communists and Socialists, and in 12 cases targeted LGBTI persons, women, migrants, Roma, and other social groups. These are the findings in the fourth report of Promo-LEX Observation Mission. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I would also mention that the following report, report number 5, will be presented on Friday, not on Thursday, as we have done previously. So it will be made public on Friday before the election day, so that we cover the whole period. So if you don't have questions, we will be waiting for you at the following press conference, and have a great day further on.